Westford Cat website or their YouTube channel, or of course by turning into on your old-fashioned television. For anyone who has questions or comments or would like to be promoted to make a live comment, please go to Airtable. The address is noted on the agenda again, and please note that you have a public comment. We will circle back to public comment when we get to that item in the agenda or after informational updates. So thank you for joining us, and we'll turn it over to Bill.
A couple of announcements. First of all, I want to congratulate the Robinson and Crisafulli schools and community for holding a very successful community meeting last week, not only for both the students, certainly who are in person, but also the Remote Learning Academy students. It was very well attended and very successful. And the theme of the meeting, which was very appropriate, is we're all in this together. And so we, that is so true these days, but I want to congratulate the staff and the administration, the Crisafulli, and all the parents in those respective communities for participating in the meeting. I just heard from Chris Chu today also. If you recall, last year there were a group of 6th graders who were in a competition at the Stony Brook School regarding experiments that the International Space Station will be conducting. And the students at the Blanchard School submitted a project to NASA that involved germination of certain types of seeds in microgravity conditions. Well, that experiment is being sent off to NASA in the upcoming days, and will be sending out Friday, as a matter of fact, and it will be launched into space and be part of the experiments. Only 33 nationwide were selected, be part of the 33 experiments nationwide to be conducted on the International Space Station. So it's an extraordinarily exciting event. We will keep you posted in terms of what is being accomplished with the experiment and how it has turned out. But the 4 students who submitted that experiment last year were Erin Cassidy, Michaela Cassie, Anvita Ademira, Grace Hinkle, and Hradini Shinde. And so I want to thank them and congratulate them. It's very exciting. I don't recall such an experiment being submitted to NASA previously, so I think this is a first for the Westford Public Schools. So congratulations to the students and the staff. I also want to mention that I attended an excellent webinar last Thursday. It was sponsored by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And Dr. Joseph Allen from the T.H. Chan School of Public Health at Harvard University was the featured speaker. And he presented a webinar, about an hour-long webinar, on mitigating the transmission of coronavirus, and particularly focusing on ventilation issues. And I will provide you with a little bit more of an update when we get to the COVID update section of the agenda, because I want to combine that with some of the statements that the governor and others have made last week. Okay, that parents and educators are reacting to. So that's it for right now until we do the COVID-19 update.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Bill. And Carrie.
We had a wonderful professional development session last Tuesday. We had 35 sessions that ran, and staff members were able to select which sessions they would find most beneficial. So we certainly, like we do after every professional development, surveyed staff, and the results were overwhelmingly positive. And I know these types of sessions and supports help teachers engage students during their remote time, whether it be asynchronous or synchronous. And we have already seen some shifts and some uses of technology in ways that have not been used before by individuals. So we're thrilled with that, and we thank the staff for their engagement on that day. And then the other piece is The search is underway for the human resource coordinator position to replace Jen Burke. The team of people who will be conducting the interviews met today for the first time, and interviews start tomorrow. And our goal is to have a few finalists that we can put forward to Bill for his ultimate selection. And the entire process is a bit expedited given the situation that we're in, but we're moving, and the team is great and committed to several days this week for interviews and meetings.
Great, thank you, Carrie. We certainly miss Jen Burke and her expertise, but wish her well in her new position. And thank you so much for expediting the process during a time when human resources is so very needed in our school system. Updates from finance.
Just real quick, we are, I'm in the process of amending our $1.05 million grant from the DESE. We were able to, when I originally applied for the grant, we had a significant amount of that budget for that grant was for HVAC and air quality. Luckily, we were able to move those funds over to the municipal CARES funds, so that freed up much needed funds that we will use towards really covering our leaves of absence and then technology costs. So we're getting all the information over to DSC for that. And then also we've already had one initial call with our bus company to talk about adjusting the number of buses that we'll need based on the ridership and allocations, and projecting out. I think we don't want to pair too far. We need to keep some capacity available in case families do change their learning model. But Bill and I had a long conference call with Dee last week, and we'll continue those discussions. For it's laid out in the contract how we can decrease the number and I think realize some cost savings. That's it.
Great, thank you, Ingrid. Love that word, cost savings. School committee updates. Ming Chen.
Last Wednesday, the town DEI committee has its first ever inauguration meeting. So the first meeting, basically, it's a big group. It has 22 appointed members plus one liaison from school committee, one liaison from select board. So it takes a while for people to actually get to just introduce themselves. In the committee, we discussed the charge of the committee, and then also the topics which people are interested in. So the next meeting will be likely next week to actually really start with officer selection, elections, and then subcommittee assignments.
Great, thank you, Ming Chen. And I saw other hands. Alicia.
So on Friday and Saturday of last week, I spent a whole bunch of time with the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Friday afternoon, they have an ongoing program, Learning Lunches, where they're running a series of workshops on weekday afternoons. And this past weekday afternoon was on the relationship between committee members and superintendents and the communication between them. And then on Saturday, I was, thanks to you all, the delegate from Westford to the 75th Massachusetts Association of School Committees annual conference. They've been doing this for 75 years now, which is amazing. The resolution that we all voted on at our last meeting, which was the resolution for the moratorium on MCAS, that did pass. That passed with 112 yay, 9 nay, and 2 abstentions. And for anyone who's interested, there were other resolutions as well that we did not vote on in our meeting, but that the MASC voted on, nearly all of which passed with the exception of one that was tabled, and that one was about COVID funding. And the concern was that the wording in the resolution sounded too much like it was locking us into one source of revenue funding. So the MASC members were concerned that would limit the scope of funding that would be available to us from the state if we just incurred the one path. So that okay, if anyone is interested, you can find all of the resolutions on the MASC webpage, and the update for voting will be up shortly. And that's it.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks for representing us. Valerie?
No, I was just letting you know that I think you self-muted halfway through your sentence.
Whoops.
Actually, no, it was me. On my mouse, my touchpad, I rolled over you and it like clicked you. I'm sorry, it was not intentional.
So Chris muted me.
I muted you. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. Any other school committee updates? Avery?
Just an update on Capital. We did not meet this week. Last week, we are meeting this week. And right now, I haven't heard any changes. Schools are due on the 20th for review in Capital. And I'll be covering the finance kind of topics in a later agenda item.
Also in conjunction with the MASC, I know a number of us were able to attend the keynote speaker on Saturday morning. Dr. Khalees Warnham gave a just completely inspirational talk on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really enjoyed her talk. If anyone ever has an opportunity to hear her speak, I encourage you to do so. She was a fantastic speaker. And certainly ties into a lot of our efforts this year. Do we have our student representatives on the line? And do we know if they have any updates? Not seeing a square for them right now, so they might not be on with us. If they are, please put something in Airtable and we'll make sure you get promoted to panelists and you can join us. So far, the comments in the, I see one submission and it's related to a COVID question. So why don't we move on to COVID updates and then we'll address that question and see if we have any others.
All right, thank you. I will say before the COVID update, we did have Khalees scheduled to do a presentation for our staff about 1.5 years ago. Unfortunately, she had to cancel that session, but we're going to try again because I know she's a very, very good resource for diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right, into the COVID-19 update. First of all, we have updated our Westford Public Schools dashboard numbers. I was just notified by an elementary principal about 2 hours ago that we have another positive case. So as of right now, we have 4 students who have tested positive, current cases, and 1 staff member. In terms of close contacts, we have 19 total close contacts in the school system, 19 students, and one staff member. Actually, 2 staff members. Excuse me, the printing on this is quite small. So probably as high a number of positive cases as we've had. We'll have to keep a careful eye on that. The DPH has now delayed by 1 day its weekly update. And so I was just able to update our dashboard with some of the information this morning with Michael Assert, our student information person. Our number of average daily incidents, according to the state, is down a little bit compared to previous reports. People can look at our dashboard. We have a weekly history of both DPH and some local data. I do want to address the comments of the governor last week because it's created a lot of anxiety in communities. It's created a lot of anxiety in school systems. we're all hoping that at the earliest possible time that is safe, we can bring all of our students back full time. But if you read the governor's comments carefully, and also Secretary of Education Piser's comments, they put a qualifier in there. And according to the Globe, according to the governor, under the new rules, I'm just going to quote here for a minute, schools and communities designated as gray, green, and yellow. Now, we have gone from yellow under the state's DPH's new designation to back to green, okay? So schools and communities designated as gray, green, and yellow are expected to have students learning fully in person. Now, here's the key phrase, if feasible, and should alternate students between days of in-person and remote learning only if there is no other way to meet health and safety guidelines. Those health and safety guidelines that Westford, along with most other communities, are using are the Center for Disease Control guidelines, which indicate masking and 6 feet of distancing. So what makes it difficult for all of us now is that, many superintendents are now receiving emails from parents saying, well, when are you going to bring our children back? We want to bring them back as soon as possible. But as the governor indicated, and as Secretary of Education Piser indicated, if feasible, only if there is no other way, a hybrid model such as we're doing, only if there's no other way to meet those health and safety guidelines. Nothing has changed with the CDC. The only change is the definition of close contact, which has moved from being 6 feet, within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, being within six feet for a cumulative total of 15 minutes over a 24-hour time span. So if we're going to continue to provide safe conditions for both students and staff, I think we need to continue for right now with the model that we have. Now, last Thursday, as I mentioned, I did attend a webinar that was presented by the DESC, and Dr. Joseph Allen of the T.H. Chan School of Public Health at Harvard University was the featured speaker. Excellent, excellent session. And he once again identified the major causes of transmission of COVID-19. His 3 main causes are close contact, airborne transmission, and also contaminated surfaces. Contaminated surfaces being the least concerning of the 3, compared to close contact and airborne transmission. One of the key messages that he provided is that distancing and proper ventilation are critical to controlling and reducing the transmission of the COVID-19 virus. So, I will say to you, I'd like to say to the parents and the staff, you know that what we have been doing is the best that we think in terms of protecting the safety of our students and our staff. Because remember now, the governor focused on getting the students back. The transmission rate that we know, according to DPH data and research data from around the world, is the transmission rate among school-age children is relatively low compared to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and above year-olds. But the concern I have is that we have a number of teachers who are approaching and a number who are in the high-risk categories. So this is not only an issue of protecting the health and safety of students, but also protecting the health and safety of our staff. And that can shut down our school system as fast as anything, because there is not a large supply of substitute teachers on the market right now. Okay? They're in such high demand across the state, across the country, across the region, because of staff either having family members, immediate or extended family members who may be immunocompromised, who in some cases are teaching remotely with an aide in the classroom monitoring the activities. So I'll stop there. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have or any of the parents might have. But it's a difficult predicament that the governor has placed us in, and I know a lot of superintendents are quite concerned.
Avery, questions?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Bill. I know that the governor's comments were not necessarily directed at Westford and our efforts, because I think we have been putting the best model forward that we can at this point. I do hope that on the COVID committee, we can start to discuss ways that we can move forward towards more return to school. But I think we also will need to engage Carrie and maybe her curriculum group who chose this model. But is there a half step that we can take before full return to school while keeping all the safety guidelines in place? And the other is just a clarification on close contacts. I just want people to understand that a contact of a close contact is not someone that needs to quarantine.
That's correct.
And so if a sibling or a friend or anybody else, a contact of a contact does not need to quarantine unless directly spoken to by the Board of Health. We really need them to drive those conversations, and not the schools, and don't guess. If you have a question, call and ask somebody.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for referring, Avery, to the COVID Advisory Committee, because we have an excellent committee. We have 4 physicians, some school nurses, some school administrators, and other staff, and we have some excellent conversations. And we ordinarily would have had a meeting this Wednesday if it were not a holiday, but it's now next Wednesday, the 18th, and looking forward to that meeting with the group.
Ming Chen.
Thank you. I want to echo Avery's comment. I think that really the COVID committee and then the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, need to actually take a hard look at how to actually increase from the current 25% in-person time, because that's really troubling for a lot of parents, for a lot of students. A lot of parents basically gave up on even doing hybrid, because they say, oh, 2 hours or 3 hours in the school doesn't make any sense, where you have to ride buses or doing transportation, all those stuff. And that's why they choose remote learning. But if other districts, again, I have said that before, can figure out how to serve lunch in the school buildings, why can't we? And then I know what prevents us from actually move from half day, 25%, to at least 2 full days, 40%, which will give the parents a lot of comfort. And then there is other districts have done that, right? So why we cannot do this?
Well, I don't think we've ever said that we can't do it, Ming Chen. I think the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee came up with an excellent plan to try and provide quality education without creating large aggregate groups of students, such as in lunch or phys ed or other areas of the school. And I think, for every critic that you might hear of the model that we use, and I haven't heard too many, there are critics of the models that other school systems are using. Now that being said, that does not mean that Carrie and I and the committee won't sit down and start looking at, along with the COVID Advisory Committee, what are our next steps? Where do we go from here to A, provide quality services, but B, protect students and staff to the greatest extent possible? So I'm not arguing with anything you said. It's just that we want to move to that point. It's just that we want to move there as safely as possible.
Yeah, I would add to that I think there are trade-offs and there are pros and cons to any model, but that it does make sense at this point, now that we have some lived experience in the classroom and in the homes with this model, to gain some more insight. And I know later this evening we will be talking about parent survey results. I think we need to continue to solicit that ongoing feedback from staff, but to do that thoughtful analysis of where we are and where we might be headed. And I think continuing those conversations is very valuable. and any model does have its pros and cons, but doing that continual assessment does make sense to make sure that we're on the best possible path and we're making those trade-offs appropriately. Did I see other hands and questions? Valerie?
I want to echo everyone's comments about trying to figure out how to reflect on the past 2 months of this model and seeing how we could try to make this a little bit more sustainable from a teacher workload perspective, and especially from a like K-2, 3 to 5 student experience perspective. But I did have some specific questions about the I'm sorry, I forget the name of the advisory committee.
Yes, COVID advisory committee.
Great, thank you. Have we leveraged any of their? Has that group, like, are we leveraging that group to weigh in on things like winter athletics? Or, I mean, last meeting we voted on clubs and activities, and I had a lot of hesitations about indoor music classes. I'm just wondering if we're leveraging that group and could have them weigh in on some of those decisions, or even just to talk about like library books, or having K-2 maybe play on playgrounds masked, like just kind of leveraging their experience for smaller decisions like that as well.
Yes, we'll be adding those items to the upcoming agenda. What we've basically focused on to this point in time, the actual metrics themselves and what makes sense, and what's relevant in terms of the data to look at, in terms of making decisions, in terms of fully remote, hybrid, full return. But those are interesting issues that we will be discussing with them. You know, Jeff Bunyan, the athletic director, will be making a presentation to you coming up, not tonight, but in a not too distant future meeting. And so it's a great committee to weigh in on those types of issues.
Other questions? Chris, did I see a hand?
Oops. Valerie covered. I was just going to emphasize the teacher workload and the elementary students, putting a priority on, you know, how we make this as good as possible for them. And if there is any increased in-person schooling, I think what we're seeing from anecdotal and survey data is that the elementary is probably where we might want to look first.
We will certainly have those discussions, Chris.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad that we have our elementary principals joining us tonight. I think that their feedback will be very helpful, and I think it is worth considering. We did pick a model that we thought would work best for all Westford students, but depending on what our experience has been, perhaps the way this year evolves, that different ages may have different needs. So I think that is worth looking at. Alicia.
Can someone just remind me, is there special education staff on the COVID reopening committee?
Yes, they just joined.
Okay, thank you.
Any other hands at this point? Any other questions?
I'd be curious. Okay. You know, we didn't get our students in on time because we didn't get them the link in a timely manner, but I didn't know if Hannah had anything to say with respect to COVID-19 and how school's going, or if she wanted to chime in. This would be a great time.
I don't have any new student updates. We did just meet as student council for the first time, and then we had the meeting last time. I actually just switched to remote learning, fully RLA, just because the schedule was kind of a lot for me to handle, and the in-person was kind of difficult for me to learn. But yeah, I don't have any student updates now.
And you just made that switch today?
Yeah, this is my first week.
It's a little early to ask you how it's going.
Gloria, may I just say, I will add to our Westford Public Schools dashboard the distribution in age ranges of the COVID virus. I thought I had that with me for tonight's meeting, and I apologize, I don't. We'll put that up there in the morning, because what has happened is there has been a marked increase in the number of children age from birth to age 19. Now, we know that some of that is college students, but certainly not all of it is college students. That has grown from a relatively small percentage of the total cases of COVID-19 across the state to increasingly larger numbers. So it can happen, you know, even though the research shows that the risk of transmission is less with people at younger ages. It is a reality. And so I think I'll present several different weeks of that data for people to just at least get a perspective on.
There were also some questions in the chat, and one of them was about the current cases. The current Westford Schools dashboard shows 14 student and staff close contacts at the elementary level. Was this an entire classroom or pod deemed as close contacts?
No, this was not an entire classroom. This was a number of students spread across 4 elementary schools.
So if they weren't necessarily designated as close contacts by virtue of being an entire classroom, and without, of course, giving away any confidential information, like what would indicate if students are 6 feet apart, what would create one student or staff member being defined as a close contact?
Well, in our data, most of the close contacts have taken place outside of the school environment. Okay, so they have been, as Avery mentioned a few minutes ago, they would have been in contact and in close contact with someone, whether it was a parent or a sibling who tested, or a friend in the neighborhood who ultimately tested positive. So that's where most of the, if not all of the close contacts have originated. The health department in town does have a part-time person now assisting them with the contact tracing. And 2 of our nurses, Sue Hanley and Kathy Boudreau, Sue at the Stony Brook and Kathy at the high school, are also assisting the health department in contact tracing. But most of these situations happen outside of school.
So I just, for my own understanding, Bill, so if a classmate is 6 feet apart, that classmate wouldn't necessarily be a close contact. But if my child carpooled with someone else back and forth to school, that child might be a close contact.
That's correct.
Okay. Other questions on this? I thought I saw a hand. Sean.
Bill, obviously, since the last time that we've met, we did close one of the schools at WA specifically after a large social gathering. Can you speak to how it was to close down a school and then transition back to hybrid, and if there were any hiccups with that? I guess what I'm getting at is, was it telling to our ability to be able to do that on a larger scale, or?
Well, we made the decision to close Westford Academy for that one day because we needed time to do a little bit of investigating of whether or not there could have been a positive COVID case and someone could have been in close contact. We wanted to make sure we were extra safe. The staff is quite concerned about incidents such as that. And look, they can happen. Those types of situations can happen in every community. You know, obviously, we ask people not to have such gatherings, but they do happen. And so we wanted to make extra sure that we spent a little more time in making sure that there wasn't any sort of positivity involved in any of the students. And to the best of our knowledge with the health department, there has not been any positive cases. So that's why we decided to come back. I will say in situations like this, though, the staff, and not specific just to Westford Academy, are very concerned when situations like this occur. Please keep in mind, as I indicated before, that some staff are working on a purely remote basis because of health-related conditions, either in their immediate family or extended family. And they have an aide or a monitor in the classroom, making sure that the students are, in fact, conducting their work on a remote basis. I think if we had an outbreak here in the community, which there has been none to this point in time, but if we had an outbreak with an increasing number of cases, I think you'd see a lot more concerned staff probably asking for leaves, okay, as they would in either any other school system or any other organization. So that's one of the reasons why we need to be extra careful. It's not only the risk of transmission among students, but the risk of transmission to staff, a number of whom are on leaves because of medical rationale.
In a related note, Bill, have we seen an uptick since in the past 2 months? Have we seen an uptick in staff requesting leaves?
We have not, to this point, not a large uptick, but there have been one or two who have indicated that they thought, it would be okay to do in-person instruction on a full-time basis. One or two of them have since changed their mind. And what makes it different, we were able to find substitutes. In some cases, here's where some of the teachers who are working full-time take on an extra section. They kind of piece it together, using, once again, high-quality Westford teachers, which is a benefit. But it has not been major, Sean. I would say no more than two to this point in time.
Avery.
Bill, quick question in regards to the party, and we all know that there were communications. I have to say I was concerned about the principal sending out a communication ahead of you, and his listing of the address in there. I think it caused a little bit of unnecessary panic in some of the arenas. And I found that your message and explaining why you were going to go on a remote day was a better message than the initial message we received.
Well, please know that I have the principals in consultation with the school nurses send out the respective notices. I do understand the concern, certainly over publishing the home address. Okay,
there was no positive case there. It was just a party, and I just felt it was a little. I felt it was a little outside of that role to put that kind of message out.
Well, I hear what you're saying. The irony is we had just sent out something, I think a day or so before, kind of discouraging activities like that, and it happened. And so, we learn from every single situation. And, do we do a debriefing after in terms of what we did that was correct and what we did that we might want to change a little bit? Yes, absolutely. So this is a classic kind of situation where we debrief after every situation.
Other questions on this topic? I know we've got a few other parent questions in the chat. There are no other committee comments at this point. I believe this has already been touched on, but I want to ask it on behalf of the parent. Westford Public Schools has not surveyed parents about any possible desire for full in-person return since June 17th. Which was before we even began school and before we had an idea of how our hybrid plan would work or not work for our families. Could we please have a survey to ask parents if parents are in favor of a hypothetical full return versus hybrid and or fully remote to better understand the varying and complex needs of all the children in Westford Public Schools?
Well, I would venture to say, and Kerry, I didn't mean to cut you off, such a survey would probably produce a result of 100% of the parents wanting them to come back. It's just that if we're going to appropriately distance the students and adhere to the CDC guidance on safe conditions in schools, and that is promulgated by the Mass DPH. Right now, it's going to be fruitless, honestly, to do a questionnaire. We can, but I can't deliver on that at the present time. So, Carrie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I think, Bill, that's exactly what I would have said. The survey results definitely show that the majority of parents who completed the survey anyway do in fact want a full return. And one of the things that I was going to mention when we go over the results that I'll mention now instead is that is one data point. And as we reflect on the hybrid model and where we've come, where we've been, and where we want to go, it's important that we have those other data points and pull them all together to say what makes sense. What are our next steps? Our next steps could be hold tight, stay the course. Our next steps could be let's try to increase in person and weigh out those pros and cons. But we wouldn't want to be putting out options that aren't feasible. I think it would be misleading and it would frustrate parents, and frankly, it wouldn't be very helpful for us if there were arrows pointing in a direction that we couldn't go. So we certainly will be assessing all of this. Other stakeholders need to chime in, and we will make sure that they do that as well. And then we'll come up with a plan or options.
The final question I'm seeing in the chat from a parent is along very similar lines. What specifically are the metrics being considered in regards to increasing the amount of in-person learning for our students? The 0 to 19 age range is too broad to make an informed decision, especially for elementary students. The state guideline for school spacing is 3 feet. If we go to this, we can increase from half day every other week to every week for the students that are currently in the hybrid method with the same teacher staffing level. Why not make this half step in the youngest age group as a measure to gain feasibility?
Well, we just to let the parents know, the metrics we use are a variety. It's the average daily incidence per 100,000 people, which the state has now redefined based on a town's population. It's the number of positivity tests that have come back. It is the number of students who are absent for COVID-related reasons, whether that's isolation or quarantine. It's also the impact of the staff, the capacity of our school system to staff our operations, which is extraordinarily important. So we have some quantitative and some qualitative metrics. Now that they have been revised, I'm going to do one final checkout with the COVID Advisory Committee next week before we publish them on the website. But we're trying to be as responsible as possible. The decision tree is consists of 2 branches. One, the empirical, all the way over this side, one, the emotional. We know that those 2 entities enter into decisions, but we try to be more empirically based. So I do know that from birth to 19, the incidence rate is lower. It is increasing, but it is possible for children to contract the virus and to transmit the virus. And I think you'll see that in the several weeks of history that I'm going to put on our dashboard tomorrow of the age breakdown of the COVID cases across the state.
Chris.
I was just going to comment that specifically to this idea of looking at metrics for transitioning to more in school, because a lot of the things that we're looking at are, the things that are keeping us hybrid versus remote. But I think there is a lot of parent interest in okay, but when would you get in school? I think that the 2 things, Bill, that I'm hearing you say that I think people probably would want to key in on are the teacher availability and the risk of teachers taking leaves out of health concerns, and the 6 feet of separation. And so, if I'm not mistaken, those are the 2 things preventing us. If COVID transmission is looking good, those would be the 2 things that would be stopping us. So the first with the teachers, that would be, you know, a process of working with the union and individual teachers and trying to get a feel for, if we went more in person, what would the effect be on teacher staffing. But then the separation, I think, comes down to, you know, the administration and this body. I mean, we, in the summer, we kind of put the 6-foot stake in the sand, and it would require us to reevaluate that. And it would require us to decide that what we felt was safe at 6 feet, we now would feel is safe at 3 feet. And so it's just, I think it just needs to be said that I think that's the big thing that has to happen. And we haven't done that yet.
And to piggyback off Chris's statement, right? These are not little tasks. This isn't just have a conversation with the WEA. The reality of it is that we've negotiated a return in this model, and to the teacher's credit, you know, everyone has signed on to it and done fantastic. You know, like, this isn't something, it's not a light switch that we can just turn on and everyone's on board. The reality of it is that if we ramp up services at all, we're going to have less teachers. I mean, that's going to be a fact. And if we can't do it, then it's an arduous task to do, right? And I think part of our job is to inform the public that it's a very difficult task to ramp up services more, right? And one of the reasons why our numbers are low are because where we are right now, what we've done and measures that we've taken. And, you know, can we live with if numbers go up more, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think our numbers are low because I think we did probably more than most other school systems in the state in terms of personal protection equipment, air quality work, HVAC tests, carbon dioxide monitoring. There wasn't anything that we spared in terms of making sure that the ventilation was appropriate, as you know, the consultant said last week, Dr. Allen. The ventilation is extraordinarily important. But you know, Chris, you're right. By all measurable standards, in most communities, if we just went by the average daily incidence from the DPH and the positivity tests, we should probably be in school. But the problem is we risk transmission, either through airborne transmission or close contact. And it was very frustrating to all superintendents towards the end of the summer when the Department of Education changed all of a sudden from the 6 feet of distancing that the CDC still articulates to 3 feet of distancing. I think, quite honestly, I think that was political in nature. I don't think it serves students nor staff well at all. So it is a distancing, it is a staffing issue, most certainly, that plays very importantly into this.
Well, and I think those are all valid points, and the two things are also tied. If we change the distancing, that may impact staff's comfort level. There are staff members that we have that may be comfortable at 6 feet, that if we have much fuller classrooms with kids at 3 feet distance, may no longer be comfortable, and it may impact their choices. And while the state has said that in theory we can put children at 3 feet apart, that does not change the CDC definition of a close contact.
That's correct.
So then we have suddenly a much bigger problem in terms of the definition of a close contact. And when there is a positive case or a close contact, the number of students who would need to quarantine is much more complicated and much broader. So there are implications to all of these possible choices. But I am glad we had the discussion tonight. I'm glad that the conversation will be ongoing. I will be interested to hear what the COVID Advisory Committee has to say about some of this latest information. And as of course we know, Bill, you've got your eyes on the numbers all the time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on this topic before I want to get to our elementary principals? Valerie.
Just Just before we switch gears, can you remind me where we stand with a staff survey too? I mean, I know WEA did one, and you mentioned one done by the social emotional subcommittee, but I'm wondering how, I mean, this discussion is great, but I'm wondering how teachers' workload would factor into this as well, because whether teachers start to weigh the risks of their comfort level versus like kind of more in-person time and the change in workload what that might bring with that. I'm just wondering if we have a survey in plans.
Yes, we've gathered some survey questions. So similar to the process for the parent survey, we did put something out just to surrounding districts saying, you know, what kinds of questions did you ask in the case that they asked something that we weren't even thinking. So that's in development now. We feel like now it would be an appropriate time to put it out because we've made some adjustments and we wanted to see that dust settle before asking questions. We wanted the change to be underway, as well as that other social emotional panorama survey. We didn't want that to go right on the heels of this or vice versa. So that will be coming out to staff within the next week or so.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep our elementary principals waiting for too long. So Avery, if it's okay with you and the committee, we're going to table the discussion on budget goals and priorities, and we'll have our elementary principals join us to talk about their school improvement plans. Welcome, everyone. I see everyone logging in.
May I just say while they're hopping on that I want to congratulate them for the work that they have done. There's a lot of focus, a lot of commonality in terms of the goals, and I applaud them for that. It shows a real unified effort on behalf of our administrators to address some issues that need to be addressed in the school system.
All right, I guess that cues me. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting us tonight so that we have the opportunity to share the successes of our 1920 school improvement plans, as well as to roll out and introduce our new school improvement plans for this school year. What we'd like to do is we would like for the K-2 or pre-K-2 and then the 3 to 5 schools to give highlights from last year's plan. And then, as I'm sure you've all noticed from your meeting packets, the pre-K to actual 12 schools collaborated on very similar goals for this year, since we are really working on many of the same things. So rather than be redundant from pre-K to 2 and then 3 to 5 with our new school improvement plans, we'd like to collaborate on that in the end, if that's okay with everybody.
Anything you say goes. The floor is yours.
Well, perfect. Plus, I was told to be brief tonight, and I don't know if you know, but the Patriots game's on tonight, so I will adhere to being brief. With that said, so I do get to start, and I did ask Scott Middlemiss to join us tonight. I just publicly want to thank Scott and Melissa Boylan for being the interim principal and interim assistant principal last year during my leave. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to rest as well as I did during that time, and they did a phenomenal job. And so I'm going to now take credit for the vast majority of their work from last year. So just to focus on goal number one, goal number one is to create and maintain a safe, collaborative learning environment that helps to motivate students to take active risks. And so one of the things that we focused on really over the last 2 years was to create a goal focused on mindfulness. We started off 2 years ago reading a book with 17 staff members that were involved in that professional development activity. From there, we started to explore and look at a number of different mindfulness lessons and resources that were available, and to develop a resource binder. And then moving on from there into last year, it was to look at actually having that group of 17 develop each of them 5 lessons and to begin implementing those in the classrooms and building a larger library. Finally, Scott and Melissa and the team worked to develop a new mindfulness room that allowed students to visit when necessary and appropriate. And I'm happy to say that those things that we worked on over the course of 2 years were successful. And so we're proud of our accomplishment. The one that was partially accomplished was mostly because schools closed down in March, and that limited our capacity to finish out those last 3 or 4 meetings that were planned for teachers to get together. But other than that, pretty successful. And Scott, was there anything you wanted to just add to that?
No, other than the mindfulness room has been kind of my plan for, like the last 3 or 4 years. So I just had to wait till Kevin was out for the year to get that done. So it worked perfectly last night.
This is true. This is very true. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Good evening. I'll go next and talk about our focus on self-regulation, which was our first goal in the plan last year. We found that we needed to support students with a growing number of self-regulation complexities, and that was important because it's really the starting point of getting ready to learn. I typically come before all of you and focus on an academic goal, but after contemplating, I really felt that highlighting the importance of concentrating on self-regulation, because it affects cognitive development and school success, problem-solving skills, and really overall mental health. So how did we do this? Our self-regulation strategies were diverse to focus on managing emotions, calming down, learning how to focus, and really learning how to get along well with others. We started this by adding a sensory path, a very bright, colorful sensory path that sort of zigzags its way through the hallways. A huge shout out to our exceptional occupational therapist, Jane Anderson, who put a lot of time and effort into finding just what our little friends would need. And then really on the most, hot and humid days that August, that's what she was down there on her hands and knees, putting down. And that's, joyful to see, because NAB stars hop, skip, and jump as they move, around the building. Certainly we're not transitioning quite as much this year to music, art, PE, and the office and the nurse's office and so forth. But whether students are doing it naturally, as they move, as a pod, or walking with, a teacher, an assistant, or so forth, that natural built-in movement break really has proved to be very successful. We also focused on creating and enhancing really sensory toolboxes. Sensory toolboxes are little areas that we have, just like good teaching, really differentiated and focused on exactly what students need in specific situations. And that could include putty, calming jars, breathing balls that sort of expand when we show children how to breathe in, breathe out, Zentangle, coloring sheets, beaded bracelets, for counting, or visuals for breathing exercises. And along with that, these might be individualized toolkits, or they might be somewhere in the classroom, such as in the calming, area, or a calming corner, where students then would know, once they know, how to read themselves and their emotions and what works best, where they need to be doing this. They could be perhaps holding a fidget at their seat or moving over to a calming area, which of course, miraculously, our guidance counselors have created a virtual calming space on their guidance blog. And with, just the click of the finger, there you have, read alouds for mindful, books and breathing exercises and so forth. So that continues. Speaking of the guidance counselors, they've also continued to work on teaching mindfulness lessons. The best part of that is it just naturally spread. The enthusiasm really was infectious. The teachers found it to be very important and very powerful. And they also use the mindfulness strategies. This could look, very different. Perhaps some teachers do, mindful breaks, take a mindful minute and have some quiet time. Zen Den has some wonderful videos that, really focus children on calming and breathing. So they might be doing that, as well as guidance lessons on friendships and social skills and how we all, get along together, and how we read ourselves, and what we need. Along with that, we had 4 first grade teachers and kindergarten teachers that actually did parent presentations to their classroom parents on, why they use the mindfulness and how effective that is. And we had a group of teachers that worked with the guidance counselors. They facilitated a mindfulness-based stress reduction group. It went along with an online course after 2 or 3 study groups, on our own. We sort of branched out and did that. So many staff members, there were 10 staff members that joined and earned 30 professional development points through that, but much more important, learned an awful lot that they could use for themselves and bring back to their students. This work continues as we learn from our students and our collective experiences.
And I'll go next, representing Miller School. So we as well focused on social emotional learning, and we continue to do so. A few years ago, we began a goal looking at how to best support children impacted by trauma. And that was when we implemented the green zone, or our sensory room. We welcomed a new occupational therapist, and together we collaborated along with our assistant principal to try to learn how this green zone could also help to support children in the REACH program, as well as children, anywhere throughout the school. And so while the data did show that it had a positive impact on children adversely affected by trauma, we also saw how positively this impacted children from these specific programs. It allowed them to find a calming space, to be able to work through emotions in a private and safe space, and allow them to return to class, which was incredibly successful. So this past year, working with Jen Wheeler, who's our fabulous OT at Miller, we created a sensory path, a really cool sensory wall where children can explore different textures, as well as a variety of different calming spaces. So due to COVID-19, unfortunately, our sensory room is now closed, but due to her ingenuity and her commitment, these sensory paths have now kind of morphed into other areas of the school, which provides a wonderful space for our friends to be able to take a break if they need that. The other piece of this goal number 1 was to establish a trauma support team. So this brings together a lot of important stakeholders throughout the school who have valuable information about students and their needs, whether it's students and families or just students in particular. So the team includes our guidance counselor, our school nurse, often our ELL teacher, perhaps a recommending teacher, and both of the administrators, myself and Hillary Sturgis. And we meet once a month and we look at how we can connect these children and families with community resources, perhaps resources within our own school, thinking outside the box. And most importantly, it has helped to establish a really nice thread of communication between all stakeholders on a really sensitive topic, which is often really challenging to create this open communication because of confidentiality. The last piece we did was to really focus on establishing a common language when responding to children with behavioral issues. So we had been working towards this for a few years and had several brief professional development sessions at our staff meetings. We still have a ways to go because any change takes time, but this past school year, our speech and language pathologist, Bethany Weisfield, did a presentation for staff on Superflex, which is a really developmentally appropriate curriculum for helping children thinking through social situations. And our guidance counselor also did a presentation on zones of regulation, which we use in our sensory room to try to help children understand in a visual way how they're feeling. I think we still have more work to do on that. The ending of the year was going to culminate with a staff survey to see where we would go with next steps. And unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. So we'd like to pick that up. And at Miller too, we also began looking at mindfulness strategies. So our guidance counselor offered a professional development opportunity for staff. She called this team the Mindful Monkeys. And we met pretty much, I would say twice a month, every Wednesday, but then there were informal meetings every other Wednesday. She continues to send out really wonderful positive mantras to staff. We learned about the importance of journaling, of deep breathing. And our goal is to bring that from, now that the staff has a better understanding of mindfulness, to be able to transfer that and share that with children. So that's, we're using those strategies this year, although it's very different with the type of learning that we have in place, but we're going to continue to focus on that. In my morning messages, I try to share messages of kindness, the importance of thinking through situations and being honest and truthful and kind, which are all a part of mindfulness. So in varying ways, we continue to work on these goals. So thank you.
I'll provide you an update from Abbott. Much like my colleagues before me, we continued with the implementation of MTSS, which is the Massachusetts Tiered System of Support. That's some professional development that we started a couple of years ago, and we all worked together on that. We were beautifully led by Kevin Lacoste, who helped us create some building-based professional development. And then we nicely morphed the fostering resilient learners work to add in some trauma support for teachers. So one of the things that we talked about is providing that same kind of calming space and how we support students who are struggling to get into school. At Abbott, that's a challenge because of space. So our school advisory council last year, we were working on how could we make some moves to provide an area where students could go, and also to see what a sensory path might look like at the 3 to 5 level, whether we would do something outside, because we started to notice that teachers were sort of creating their own by leaving PE and heading out the gym doors and walking the long way around the building to give students those movement breaks that they needed, and adding in their own kind of walking lunges and different things. So we started to explore what could a sensory path look like here at the 3 to 5 level. In lieu of that, teachers and students started to create their own spaces within their classrooms. We had some students who asked if they could share at a community meeting that they wanted to make kind of a cozy corner in the classroom that had some fidgets and had some just some calming pieces. And they introduced that at a whole school community meeting, and teachers started to implement some of those things in their classrooms. We shared some videos, and we started to talk about having check-in and check-out systems for students. So a struggling student might have a trusted adult that they check in with in the morning, set some goals, get them kind of set up for a great day, and then meet with that student at the end of the day, check in with that teacher, see how it went, and maybe set some new goals for the following day. We found that to be very successful. We also have a wonderful occupational therapist, Jane Anderson, who set up some green zones around the building for students to access during their break times. And we were using the Inner Explorer program. All of our teachers implemented that mindfulness program in the classroom, also incorporated some journaling time, and we were able to extend this to families so that they could actually access it at home as well. So one of the ways I wanted to take that a step further with MTSS is sort of look at, that's the social emotional part of MTSS. And now what about the academic piece, and what can we do to start implementing, or maybe kind of look at some of the tier 1 interventions that we're using for the whole class setting. So we implemented a common planning time where teachers were able to meet and talk about some of these interventions, share ideas. And then we started a study group with the book from a woman named Jennifer Saravallo, and it's called Understanding Texts and Readers. We had about 18 staff members who joined that book, and it's basically about best practices for reading comprehension. And we even had some of our reading interventionists sort of volunteering their time to take part in that study group as well. And there we just talked about, yes, we have some wonderful intervention services, but what can we do before we get to that point to meet the diverse needs of the students in our classrooms? So that was going really well. We actually had finished the book, and we had one more meeting to have before the shutdown. So it was not a goal that we intended to finish in that 1 year. We wanted to read the book, and then we wanted to bring in some other resources, continue that goal to create some lessons for the following year. So I did put a pause on that because I don't think it's the right time to add that in, although I do know that teachers are certainly using what we've learned. But in terms of creating and sharing those lessons, we'll move to that hopefully next year when things are a little more back to normal. And then the other piece I want to bring up is we also implemented some progress monitoring support for our special education staff. And I really want to thank Jennifer Traverso, who is our ELA curriculum coordinator, and she partnered with us here at Abbott to work with our special education team to help them look at their individual students, some of the interventions that they were implementing, looking at the progress monitoring data and deciding where do we go from here. And that turned out to be a wonderful collaboration where we were really able to celebrate the teaching and learning. So good stuff. I'll pass it off to Chris.
I think Sharon is actually going next.
I'll go next. Thanks, Chris. Thanks,
You did tell me alphabetical, right? Yes, I'll work on that.
It's okay. No worries. So we rounded out our 4th year of our mindful goal, which doesn't mean it stops at Chrysophilia. We'll continue into something else. We actually implemented, between myself and Melissa Boylan, we implemented the 5 lessons that the mindful committee came up with after a year of research. So we started with a lofty goal of 10, and we decided that 5 would probably be most beneficial for the staff. So Melissa and I delivered 3 of the lessons in person, which was probably the best part of it because we got to be in the classrooms teaching with the kids. So, and we would go together, so we could tag team off of each other. And the kids would be like, oh, here they come. What are they going to teach us today? And with visuals and things of that nature. And then 2 of them were independent activities that we shared during our turkey trot last year, which is our annual PTO fundraiser. We'd make gratitude wheels, and then we sent home a gratitude game for families to play during the holiday seasons. So those are 2 of the independent lessons, but the in-class lessons were probably our favorite part. And we did accomplish that by February, which was fantastic. So I didn't have to wait to say we didn't do it because of COVID, because there's so many things we didn't do, but there were actually so many things that we were able to do because of COVID. And one of the other things we're able to do because of COVID was to become creative thinkers of transition and thinking outside the box of how do we meet the needs of our students who are transitioning from 2nd to 3rd, 3rd to 4th to 5th, and then 5th to 6th, because those are the big years when you move buildings. So as a team, I'd have to say we collaborated very well as an elementary team throughout this whole time from COVID throughout. We typically do, but even now we've become a stronger team together, that we had to think outside the box of how do we transition our students successfully. We could have all said, oh, we can't do this, but we did come together and we made videos for each grade level, featuring the office staff, the IA team, student support services, to meet the next grade level teams, because we didn't have our traditional move up day last year. And trust me, this team here, we were trying to figure out how could we do move up day virtually. But with given the situation and moving forward, we wanted to make sure that we had everything covered. So we had the students meet us virtually, which doesn't take away from the in-person piece, but you get to put a face with the kids. And the best part is the kids we met remotely and the kids that have come into our building like, hey, you are real. So it's been really great to have our kids back and forth. We did individual class meets with the incoming 3rd grade students with our teachers, and the principals each met with the classes to read. Typically we visit the buildings, but we weren't able to this year. The 2nd grade and 3rd grade teams at Chrysophilia typically meet during move up day, but they met via Google this year. And they actually said they liked it better because they had a little more one-on-one time with the 2nd grade teacher. So they called it speed placement, even though kids were placed, but they were calling it speed placement because you got to give some more information without being in a large group of sharing like we typically do. The grades 5 and 6 teams finished their guidance spreadsheets, but they also had the opportunity to meet via Google to talk about our kids going from 5th grade to 6th grade with both Stony Brook and Blanchard. And we had consistent communication through all grade levels regarding the transitions and best practices to meet all the learners. And as a team, and I put this under my Chrysophilia transition piece, but as a team, we collaborated together to host our first virtual back to school night to share with all the K to 5. We stressed out about this a little bit, but we did it about meeting the needs of students and staff during our reopening model. And what would that look like coming back to school in a hybrid or remote model? So I think some of the things weren't necessarily accomplished in person, but we did a really great job, I feel, meeting them in a virtual manner because we had to think outside the box. So just like we do on Thursdays at Christopher, think outside the box. So that's my update from last year at Christopher. Chris?
Thanks, Sharon. So I'm going to give an update from the day school, which was goal number 2, increasing student achievement and opportunities to apply understanding through inquiry-based learning, writing across multiple forms and genres for a variety of audiences, and project-based learning in all content areas. And the first thing that I would like to tell you about is the success of our Project Lead the Way program, which is an organization in partnership with schools like MIT and WPI that brings inquiry-based science and project-based learning to elementary school all the way up to grade 12. So it was a $10,000 grant that was initiated by our former digital learning specialist, Marianne Butterline, who we are fortunate now to have on our student support team. And the children engaged in activities ranging from coding and robotics, and it happened during our enrichment block. And it was really quite well received and successful. Unfortunately, we had to put the program on hold this year, and I'm in consultation with that organization because we would like to get that up and going next year, because our plan is to roll out some of the science inquiry projects and project-based learning for grade 3 students, and then following that would be grade 4 and 5. So we started with the technology, and then we're going to do some science-based topics after that. We also had a very successful coordinated professional development program that was organized by the humanities coordinator at the time, Amanda Lapham, who's now back as our 5th grade teacher at the day school, and our own literacy specialist, Allison Bates. And they focused on implementing a PD on writing from sources. So we had done some analysis of how students were doing with writing, both on the report card grades and then past MCAS. And if you look across the Commonwealth, many districts have students who are struggling with the writing components on the MCAS exam. So it certainly wasn't unique to the day school, but definitely something that we needed to improve. So we are getting away from the traditional assessments that were based on legacy MCAS exams where children would write narratives like, what did you do on your snow day? To now children are looking more closely at texts. So they might be reading a narrative text, and then they have to write a narrative from the perspective of a different character in that story. And that requires a whole new set of skills. And that's where Allison and Amanda came in with a great professional development program. So they started off with launching writing and curriculum and resources. And then we had setting teacher and student goals for writing, using exemplars, looking very closely at revision, and then finally, and most importantly, strategies for working with special education students. In addition to that, both Amanda and Allison also repeated a very successful professional development program in spelling that they did for the other elementary schools, and they titled it Highway to Spell, based on that song. I think, is that AC/DC? I'm so bad with popular culture. Okay, thank you, Scott, for, I'm more of a classical music kind of a person, but everybody thought that was funny when they came in with the t-shirts. Anyway, in these sessions, the teachers learn the tools for teaching a systematic sequential phonics program using syllable types and syllabication, something that is certainly done at the primary levels, but we found that children lagging in those skills certainly needed that professional development here. And then finally, I wanted to talk about our pilot of the Bridges to Intervention program that we use for special education students here at the day school. So this is a program that's used by our interventionists across the district, but we knew that our special education students in particular who had pull-out programs and had goals in mathematics were not necessarily successful with the traditional curriculum offered by Everyday Math 4. And so they were definitely weak in foundational skills. And we saw children struggling in the regular 5th grade classroom, for example, when they had to find the volume of a prism, when they could not even multiply or didn't have the basic skills and place value and that sort of thing. So we knew that Bridges to intervention program was a very structured program. We tried it out with some of our students last year, and now we're bringing that up to 5th grade as well. And there is a professional development opportunity that our student support staff is taking advantage of this year so that we can make sure that our special education students are successful. With that said, we are now going to transition to talking about our current school improvement plan. So all of the elementary administrators collaborated on this, and the goals are based on the reopening plan. And first up is going to be Susan, and she is going to talk about goal number 1, which is operations and hygiene.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so as Chris said, we consistently have created a unified plan, and our first goal focuses on the operations and hygiene committee with the safety guidelines. And we all have consistently implemented, diverse safety practices to protect students and staff. And while, as you can see on the safety practices, for the sake of the rest of the audience, I'll just name a few. We have implemented by minimizing transitions and our movement through our hallways, established caring rooms. We've revised our visiting procedures with guests. The classroom setup is dramatically different in our disinfecting and cleaning, and working with our custodians changed quite a bit, and our arrival and dismissal procedures and how students come in and out of the building, and with sanitation stations, very different. We continue to monitor as we go. It's not just that all of this, is complete. Some specific examples of that would be Superintendent Olson already mentioned with the revised definition of, close contacts being within 6 feet for 15 minutes, or more cumulatively over a 24-hour period. We had to, adjust to that. And for those of us that have to, work with the Board of Health about close contacts, that makes a very big difference. Fortunately, we are set up with the 6 feet, which I think, much to what we've already discussed, is why we're, in the position we are in. Also, just want to mention managing the PPE. As Superintendent Olson said, we feel incredibly fortunate that we have so many items, at our disposal. But then we also need to monitor that supply, as we go, and check in on that. And the other thing that, I just want to mention, be really remiss not to highlight here, is that we are all incredibly impressed every day by our staff members and how they have responded and adjusted to COVID-19. It truly reveals the heart of Westford Public School educators and their passion to teach and educate all of our students. They have been adaptable learners and quickly, adjusted. Really, it felt like on a dime, in March, to sort of reinvent education, but more importantly, to adjust to all the changes in the teaching safety protocols. So tremendous thank you. Just doesn't even seem enough, the amount of gratitude that we have for the work that they're doing daily with your children.
So I'm up next, and I'm going to highlight goal number 2, which is the teaching and learning. And that's implementing the district-wide hybrid remote learning academy models as defined by the teaching and learning reopening committees. And so we had very similar goals. And one of the strategies that we have is to adjust the instructional practices and lesson planning to maximize learning opportunities for all students in both the hybrid and the remote learning academy models. And you all know countless school committee meetings talking about the teaching and learning model. So instead of going through all of that, I wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts of our faculty and staff who are working day and night to make all of this happen for their students and their families. teachers are just spending so many hours managing 2 pods of students with both live in-person or virtual instruction and asynchronous learning opportunities. And for students who are struggling with organization and keeping up with the independent work, faculty have created individual schedules with links to meetings highlighting their specialists and their interventions. Staff have also provided additional check-in meetings for selected students and have worked closely with families to brainstorm other supports that may be needed to make sure that students are successful. And again, a shout out to the families who are partnering with us, because we certainly could not do any of this without them. Then teachers right now are focusing on priority standards identified by the curriculum coordinators and carried to maximize learning in key areas. Our math and reading interventionists are providing tiered supports during the students' asynchronous weeks, and students continue to make progress with that helpful guidance. And it goes without saying that our special education team has worked tirelessly to support students, update parents, complete assessments, and most importantly, our student support meetings have been on time and very efficiently run by our elementary team chairs. So big shout out to them. And then finally, I would really like to emphasize the importance of our integrated arts that the district was able to support and continue. And I'm grateful to work in a district that supports music and arts and physical education, and that was a big priority. We're certainly keeping those opportunities for art and music, physical education, instrumental music alive this school year. So thanks very much for that. And then the second strategy was just about providing professional development opportunities that Carrie certainly already talked about, and additionally happening at all of the schools. I mean, there was a silver lining in the pandemic. All of our teachers now are experts in technology, and I can safely say that all of the techniques that they have learned will not go in vain, and I know that they're going to be using them successfully as we move forward and finally are able to take off these masks and get back to normal. So thanks to everybody for that.
Okay. Hello, I have goal 3, social emotional learning, which you know is near and dear to my heart for many, many years, not just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have 3 components of our goal. We're going to focus on the Panorama platform, trauma-sensitive classrooms, and transitions. Each is equally important in maintaining and enhancing the social emotional development of our students and our staff. We often think about the kids in general, but we also have to think about our staff and supporting them. Like Chris said, they're working really hard across the entire district to meet the needs of all of our learners, and we need to make sure that we keep that in focus as well. So part of that is with the Panorama platform and the surveys. We did implement the student and staff survey in round 1 for grades 3 to 12, and all staff, pre-K to 12, and the pre-K to 2 surveys are being completed by parents, and they're still in development, so they'll be coming shortly to the families. So round 1 of our surveys for the 3 to 12 students and the staff closed out as of last Friday. So once that data is collected, it will be uploaded to our dashboards, and we'll be having some professional development on how to read that data and utilize that data and move forward with that piece of data. Now, in addition to round 1, we have 2 more rounds of surveys that will come out, one focusing on families, and then the third one would focus back on students and staff on the SEL competencies of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Then we will have some more PD from the leadership team. Wendy Pkachuk and Brian Rourke have been instrumental, along with Risha Jain and Julia Mozika, on the subcommittee for the Panorama committee that they're on, just providing us with information and helping us to look at that data and what our next steps will that be. So we can't thank them enough for their part of that piece. The second part of the goal was the fostering of our resilient learners. And we started last year building trauma-sensitive classrooms. And we're going to continue our PD with that piece and giving our staff and students strategies of how to cope when you're having a challenging time. And what do we do? What does it look like when someone's having a challenging time, whether they're a student or a staff member? How do we address that? And so the schools are together collectively working on creating common language to address students who are having a difficult time with their emotions or self-regulation. one thing that we have talked about, and we've been implementing through the schools, is a tap in, tap out for staff. So if they're having a time, they just need a moment, they call down to the office, say, hey, I need a break, or they like to catch us in the hallways when we're walking around. And it's just a good opportunity for them to say, I'm gonna take 2 minutes for a mindful minute, or just to take a walk and come back, and it gives them a fresh start. So they've been implementing that as we go. The third strategy, as I spoke a little bit in a Crisafulli update, was the transition activities. This year, we're thinking the whole picture. Could be in person, we hope. Might need to be some with remote. So as we look ahead to 2021, we're going to continue to focus on the best practices to ensure a smooth transition for all students, and continue to focus on between building transitions from grades 2 to 3, 5 to 6, and pre-K to K. So the transition communication to all buildings as we move through the placement process to create the well-balanced classrooms to meet the needs of our learners. And it's our greatest hope to provide in-person transitions next year. I have to say, another silver lining of the COVID was having our 3rd grade transition day this past fall. It was awesome to have the kids in the building by themselves and seeing, I know they had to get used to the hybrid model. However, just seeing them in the building, like, wow, because a lot of them hadn't been in the buildings, and our 3 to 5 buildings look a little bit bigger than the K to 2 buildings, just space-wise. So just having that extra time to spend with the incoming 3rd graders, I thought was very beneficial. And I would hope that maybe we can continue that moving forward in the future years. So it is our greatest hope to be in person, to have move-up days, tours through the buildings at grade 2 to meet our students. But however, given our experience in the spring, we are well equipped for virtual transition activities if needed. And finally, just a few things to highlight that's going on in our buildings right now. So we've already started working on our SEL goal on our school improvement plans. We have daily virtual announcements, our virtual community meetings, mindful minutes, Zen dens, staff checks in, checks out. We have virtual calming spaces. There are a couple classrooms I know at Crisafulli and in other schools, they have like a small corner. They may not have all the stuffies and squishies that they usually have. They have a nice little space where you can go over and just sit maybe on the floor on a little stool and have some coloring pieces there that they take back with them. The sensory paths and the sensory rooms. So as we work together, I am sure that we'll be going down the path of social emotional learning for many, many years and coming up with great things collectively to meet the needs of our students and staff. And so now Lori will present our DEI goal.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, so goal number 4 is diversity, equity, and inclusion to promote a school environment characterized by tolerance, respect, and safety. I'm going to start with just a quick little personal story. In full transparency, I had a conversation with a parent last year, I want to say February, and she called me and asked me personally some great questions about what I was doing in this area, but more specifically, how I was making sure that her child felt included in the Abbott School community. And at the beginning of the conversation, I felt really confident that I was doing all of that because, that's what we do. And there's nothing we want more than for all of our students to feel included. But as the conversation went on and we really got a little bit deeper and she pushed me in a very good way, I felt like I didn't really have a good answer. And I really honestly didn't feel like I was doing anything that was specifically including her child. So that conversation had been playing in my head, and I brought it up at our school advisory council meeting, and I talked to some staff members about it and started to think, what can we do and how can we push ourselves to really think about how every student feels when they walk through our door. And it put us in a pretty uncomfortable place. And then the events happened, the shutdown happened, and then the George Floyd happened, and it was it really started to surface. And I sent another very honest communication to the staff to say, this is important. I don't feel all that equipped. I want to be. Let's figure out what we need to do. So many of us across the district, teachers included, started doing a lot of reading. I know I joined a wonderful study group with principals across the state to read White Fragility. That was a a book that definitely puts you in a thoughtful space. A lot of teachers were reading the same thing. I had teachers asking for different resources. I went on to read How to Be an Anti-Racist. Teachers were reading Stamped, and we started talking about, what can we do? Principals started talking about what do we need to do. Many of us listened to the students speak this summer about their own personal experiences that, it really got us thinking, and we realized that we have a lot of work to do. So we're all extremely excited about this goal. I'm so excited about the passion that I see, not only in my colleagues, but just in our staff in general, in our leadership. So in the first strategy, we're obviously looking to continue our district-wide core values of spirit, and we have been infusing a lot of this teaching and learning into this goal, and we will continue to do so. But I think it will be in a more thoughtful manner and a little more honest, maybe a little more. Take a few more. I think we'll have the courage to take a few more risks with this. We're all getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and pushing the envelope a little bit. And I think that that's going to serve us well, and it's really going to serve our students well. So we'll continue with our school meetings in any way that we can. We're all finding unique ways. I know that Robinson and Crisafulli did their community meeting. We're doing some grade level read alouds here so that students can kind of lay eyes on their peers with some live read alouds, and all the schools are embracing creative ways to teach these core values. One of the other things that has come of this is we have our library teaching assistants and library media specialists building off of some lessons that were originally created by Donna Pobuck at Miller for her K-2 students, these spirit lessons, and she shared them with us, and the library media specialists and teaching assistants have been helping to kind of make them fit for grades 3 to 5, and they've been wonderful. So that's been going really well. And the other thing that we're working on is implementing so we have the district-wide DEI committee, which we have representation from all schools, which is wonderful. And also Amy Bailey and Janet Kierstead established the district-wide Bar We discussion group, which is building anti-racist white educators. And then an offshoot of that happened where very passionate teachers decided to bring that to the building level. And that's great because it's this is challenging stuff, and we're really trying to encourage our staff to feel safe and take these risks to embrace this content that we haven't really, I don't think, delved that deeply into as we are now. So at the building base, what's happening is the facilitators are taking what they do at the district-wide Bar We, and they're sort of a week behind and implementing it for a smaller, more building-based group, and that's going really well. We're also doing some, as I mentioned, some of those monthly grade level read alouds. The library media specialists are also working on inventorying our current resources, identifying any newer resources that we might need for staff and students in terms of more culturally responsive literature. And the library media specialists are also working to create lessons for the K-5 students on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and pushing those out to classroom teachers. So we have a lot in the works. We're really excited about this work. We're really excited to keep going and try to get comfortable in some of this discomfort and do whatever we can to make all of our students feel as though they belong, and encourage them to have a voice so that we can continue to be responsive to them. Now I think I'm handing it off to Donna for a wrap up.
Yeah, so I'm in charge of fielding any questions and directing them to the appropriate people if you have any.
Wow. I'm always so amazed when you come and present to us, because it is just so inspiring to hear not only your expertise but your passion for the work that you're doing, and this year so much more than a regular year. I'm sorry that we don't have you in person with us, but I'm so glad to have you all join us virtually and share all of the important things that are happening in your buildings and in this virtual space as you're connecting with your students. And thank you for sharing all of that with us. I'm really just blown away. If the people on the committee members have specific questions, comments, please chime in, wave a hand. I think everyone's probably in the same space I am of just being so mesmerized. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the same, just gratitude, really, for your time tonight, first of all. And I know the preparation that went into just being here and taking your evening to be with us, but also for how proactive a group you are, how collaborative a group you are, and that extends down to the staff at your schools, and then just your willingness, which you've laid out really clearly, to take risks in any number of areas. And boy, what a year for taking risks, and you guys have not shied away. And I know how much work you've put in and your staff have put in, so just honestly, just gratitude.
Alicia?
Similarly, thank you. I am so impressed how social emotional learning has bloomed through the district. As someone who has a fifth grader and an eighth grader, really, who still to this day will talk about rock brain and flex brain and super flex thinking, to have those to have that language, to have that common vocabulary run through all of the buildings is phenomenal. And I think it goes a long way to treating social emotional learning as an inclusive, applies to everyone, a rising tide lifts all boats situation, where we understand that it benefits all of our students and our staff. So I'm blown away too. I am so impressed, and I'm so grateful for your dedication and for the inclusivity that all of these this year's goals and last year's goals too, for the inclusivity across the board of all of the goals. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I just say that I think we have the finest group of elementary principals that you'll find in any school system anywhere. And I think from this presentation, you have garnered that they provide strength, inspiration, and motivation to each other. And you look at the smiles on the faces, you look at the attentiveness, you look at the child-centeredness of this group, and they're second to none. So can't thank you enough.
I think if I have a question for any of you, it's really, what can we as a school committee do to support you, not only now through this very difficult year, but also into the future? We will be, of course, embarking on a budget process this winter, and I just would be remiss if we let the opportunities to slip by without asking you, since you are here with us, is what can we do to support you during this year and into the future?
May I just say, I think we're all kids when it comes to positive reinforcement. And it's great to see an email or a comment every so often. And I'm not saying it specific to this committee, but any other committee that I've ever served with. A little pat in the back and a nice word goes an awful long way. And as I said, it's not that you don't do that. You're doing that right now. But I think that question often comes up, Gloria, in meetings with educators across the state. And we're all kids at heart when it comes to that. That's why we all try to be as supportive as each other as possible. And This is a great, great group.
So I'm not one of our administrators, but working with our administrators and our staff in the DEI group, I do want to bring forward that something that they've all shared there is that we need to make space for them to have these topics come up in professional development. We need to allow space and time within our Wednesday professional development structures, our other professional development structures for things like the We Bar group and for things like anti-bias training and things like that, and that they would appreciate, the staff members I've heard from, they would appreciate that when we're talking about professional development and when we're talking about budget priorities, that we're making space for what they need. And mostly what they need is they feel like they need to be trained in a way that they can respond and supported from our perspective, supported in their responses. So I think, I'm not an administrator, I'm not a staff member, but these are some of the things that I'm hearing from staff and administrators through the DEI group.
Well, Sharon?
Alicia, I have to echo that for the staff. A lot of staff have shared for PD that we can take something away to have those difficult conversations, or when they arise in the class, what's the language or a common language we can use together throughout the district that would be helpful in that piece. And when you ask, how can you support us? You have been supporting us, and we're very appreciative of the school committee support and the ongoing support we know that you provide for us. So at the moment, I'm sure we could think of a lot of things you could ask for, but your support and your just positivity as we navigate through this, I think is what we can ask for right now. And as budgets roll around, we might ask for a little bit more, but I can't think on the spot right now for that piece. But like Bill said, keeping that support behind us is just amazing. And we've been on this boat ship together, and we're going to continue on the ship together. But we thank you for supporting us through. We've all supported each other through this whole piece that we've never thought we'd ever be in. So thank you for supporting us now and as we move forward through this.
Lori, chime in. Anyone who's got thoughts, chime in.
Just to piggyback on what Sharon said, I think that the support of the community has been really what's keeping the teachers going. I think I speak for all the principals when I say we're getting a lot more positive emails than we are negative, for sure. And I think that our teachers really need to hear that, because they are working night and day, and that was highlighted for you tonight. Just, I think, a little drop in the bucket of what they're actually doing. And so just hearing that that's appreciated from families, and we're hearing it a lot. So I want to thank the community for that, because that's really why we do what we do. So it's great to hear.
And please know that sometimes school committee will get parents who are reaching out, parents who are frustrated, families who are struggling, and the response that I try to provide on behalf of the committee most often is to redirect them to you, and I hope that you understand that's not us passing the buck, but to you, but really to direct those parents who are frustrated to the resources that can most ably assist them, because often we'll be receiving feedback from a parent who's frustrated or struggling, and they may not have yet gone through the chain of escalation where they do need to start at the classroom level and have that conversation with the teacher about what's going on, or have a conversation at the building level with the principal. So I feel so often what we do end up doing is being a sounding board for that parent to voice their frustration, and then encourage them to take the appropriate steps and to send them to you, our experts, who are better able to serve them and help the specific needs of their child, because that's not our wheelhouse. That's yours, and we know that. So we so very much thank you for everything you are doing for all students in the district during this incredibly challenging year. And if you ever do have thoughts, concerns, needs that you need to convey to us as we embark on the budget season, and as your group starts to have conversations about what the needs in your buildings are, and what it is that you feel like is the biggest priority for you and your building's needs for the future, please communicate that with us and maintain an open dialogue. We absolutely want to hear from you.
May I just say, Gloria, may I just say, I think it might be helpful if, now that we're a couple of months into the school year, if you recall, in the last year or so, we did some school visits from time to time. I think it would be great for a group of us to just walk through the buildings, get a sense of what's going on, what it looks like, what it feels like, so that, you know, we all feel a little bit more comfortable in terms of a direct observation.
Yeah,
I thought
go ahead, Lori.
Something that I need a community member on my school advisory council. So if anybody's watching is very passionate about joining the Abbott School Advisory Council, I would really love that. I'm quite sure that I could ask a friend, you know, an acquaintance in town, and they would do that. But I would really like to have someone who is truly interested in getting involved. So come to Abbott School. We have a great time.
We also need one at day. So thank you, Lori, for bringing that up.
And don't forget.
Can you guys make, I don't know if you have at the schools, on the school Facebook pages, make posts soliciting that could be shared? Because I think people in town, you know, there's a number of groups, either to be shared to a Facebook group in town or just on people, you know, school committee members sharing it. Because I do think people don't even know that there are community members on those committees that aren't, you know, that aren't staff, aren't parents, aren't administrators. So I think you would get people if people actually knew that that was an opportunity to serve our schools.
Yeah, one idea that occurs to me is the League of Women Voters is a great resource in town, and they might be able to reach out to their membership, active involved community members who really might take an interest. I know at a recent civic social, there were a lot of community members who were actively asking questions about the schools and COVID and how the schools were responding and how things were going in the schools, and had a lot of curiosity about it. So I think there definitely are community members out there who would love to know more and be engaged, and they might be a conduit and a resource. So I know I caught a couple hands. Abbott, Day, who else might need a community member? Miller. Is there anyone else looking for one? Okay, I'll definitely, I will forward that onto the League of Women Voters and see if they might want to share that with their membership, and see if we can find you some community members.
Great job, everyone.
Yeah, I think there's a round of virtual applause going on. Thank you absolutely so much for everything you're doing, and for joining us and sharing all of that with us tonight. Absolutely inspiring and invaluable information. Thank you so much. Any last minute questions, or shall we let everyone go to their evening, which might involve a football game? Thank you all for joining us. And that's a tough act to follow, but Avery, I believe you are up next with goals and priorities.
Yes, that's a tough act to follow. Truly amazing what they're doing. The finance group, as you know, last meeting, we brought together some ideas on priorities for the coming year, and we listened, and I thank you all very much for your input. And so, other than the typo, Chris, is there anything that people had to say? I decided it really was, as it sort of came around, we really need to think about what factors are impacting our budget in a given year. The strategies, I mean, those are probably going to be more consistent year to year. But right now, we want to make sure that those are the strategies that we're using, some of which we learned from our fearless finance director there. And then the priorities that I heard from the committee. And these are in no particular order. They're actually alphabetical, I think. And so these were the 5 things that we heard and that the finance subcommittee then discussed at our last meeting, after school committee meeting last go around. And we really started to pull apart each of these 5 topics. And so I just gave a little bullet on each one. We had much more, and now our task is to sort of take a look at those, bring in some experts in those areas. So I know, Carrie, you'll be getting tapped to come in and talk to us on a number of topics. For technology, we want to hear from Stephanie and Julie and Gail and Mike Wells, and what's working, what's not working, what do we need to prioritize. But technology, we know that's not going anywhere, and we need to prioritize it given the remote learning situations that we're in. I chose the word wellness just as sort of a catch-all for the social and emotional, and as we heard tonight from principals, a lot of mindfulness activities that are going on, as well as the diversity, equity, and inclusion, both at the school level and at the town level. So we don't want those to be forgotten, as we know that those are some of the superintendent's goals. Staffing, we have Unit A contract and I believe some other contracts that are open. So that, of course, is a priority for us to resolve those contracts equitably, while keeping class ratios down. I think we all agreed last year and in years past that part of what sets Westford apart is our class sizes and keeping those to the recommendations that had been set forth. So at this point, I don't think we need to rank anything, because I think we're going to be looking at this as a whole. Did people have other thoughts? As I said, last time the committee's input was greatly appreciated, and I tried to synthesize that, discussed it, and then brought it forward as where we are working as we move into this budget, knowing that tomorrow night the select board will be discussing town meeting, and that we are hoping with a more tentative date of hopefully later in the spring, May or June, these priorities and strategies will be then put together to lay out a timeline. And I believe superintendent has one of those timelines actually penciled in for this week in a listening session. Is that correct, Bill?
Yes, and I can mention that. I was going to mention that right after you're finished, if you want.
Sure,
Or I
we'll
can
talk
mention
about
it right
that.
now.
Okay, so that will be the sort of the start of as we put this together, because we do want community input, staff input, and I know that the administration is working with the leadership team to make sure that all of their priorities are heard as well. So I will, if there's any thoughts on this, we can share it now. Bill, do you want to talk about Thursday night?
Yes, Thursday night will be primarily a listening session to assess the community values that are inherent in Westford towards education and educational services. A couple of years ago, we spent some time as a leadership team developing a document of what goes into a high-functioning school district. And we identified a number of variables under some broad categories. First of all, our ability to meet state and federal mandates appropriately and with great fidelity for students, because most of them apply to the disadvantaged or the disabled students. High quality teaching and learning, not only from a cognitive perspective, but as we've talked about tonight, what are we doing to address the whole child, the development of a child's social and emotional well-being and skills to be able to cope and to be become more resilient in life. And the third component is a community that values high quality education. And that's the purpose of Thursday night. I'd like to listen along with, with Kerry and Ingrid and all of you, what's important to the parents in this community from an academic perspective, from an ancillary service perspective. We'll talk about anything and everything can be on the board. Now, the only thing I would caution is, look, we know that everyone wants us to get the students back into school, and that's a given. So I'd like to try and focus on Thursday night, not on when is it going to happen, but what's important to them in terms of their own child's development and the development of other children in Westford. And so, if the residents would please give some thought to Thursday night's meeting, and we'll be looking very much forward to interacting with them.
Other comments and questions about where we're headed with the discussion on Thursday, or budget priorities that will continue to be discussed in the finance subcommittee? Okay.
Good document.
Seeing none, I think that means that that your document encapsulated the committee's comments from the previous meeting, Avery. So thank you very much.
And I did put a link for folks at home. I did put a link to register for Thursday's virtual Zoom forum. So click on that. And it also went out in an email from the superintendent today.
Fantastic.
And thanks, Avery and budget subcommittee. My feelings about that document will never flocculate.
You knew he had to go there. You knew he had to go there. He had to do it. Okay. Next up, parent survey results. Carrie.
All right, I am gonna share my screen here. Oh, Chris, will you give me permission to share? And so this is the survey that went out to parents and last week, or the end of the week before, and closed on Friday. And we were very pleased, as we always are, at the level of parent involvement. We always appreciate so many people willing to take time out of their busy schedules to give us the feedback that we need to improve what we're doing or reflect on what we're doing. So first, I'm just going to dive in a little bit into the responses that we received, so you have an overview here. In kindergarten through grade 2, we had 443 responses, 3 through 5, 492, 6 through 8, 535, and 9 through 12, 692. So that's about 50% if you're looking at number of students that we have. And we did ask families to please complete one survey for each student. So it's just short of 50%. So we're pleased with that turnout. And then you can see the breakdown there within each grade span, whether, the percentage of people that were hybrid versus RLA. Proportionally, it's not exact in terms of the whole number of students that we have at those levels going hybrid versus RLA. The RLA participants were a little bit less in terms of percentage compared to the whole group and compared to the hybrid. So generally speaking, one of the questions was related, the next several slides are related to the hybrid, and then we'll shift to the Remote Learning Academy. But we wanted to know overall, what's the experience been? And we were actually quite pleased with the results. We know that the hybrid model is not set up for an optimal learning environment for all students. We educate every child who comes through the door. We put our hearts and souls into it. Our staff work around the clock to make this work well for students. But we know that there are many limitations to the hybrid model, whether it be our model or other versions of the model that other districts are doing. So we were quite pleased that about or in 3 of the grade spans, over 50% felt as though the experience has been positive. And while we don't ever hold ourselves to the standard of a moderate level of quality, even within that mediocre category, we said, okay, well, we're happy that people are getting through it without answering that it's a negative situation and disastrous. So you can see there, we do have 8.8% at the K-2 level who answered that it's a negative experience, 10.4% at 3 to 5, and then not very surprisingly, that drops a little bit at the secondary levels in middle school and high school. And I think much of that has to do with the fact that the students are more independent and can navigate the technology, can organize their day and their time on their own, whereas at the elementary levels, we do rely heavily on parents, no doubt. So still sticking with the hybrid, we asked families, how safe does your child feel in school? And certainly the team of administrators and teachers who were involved under Bill's guidance, getting the schools up and running, safety was our top priority. So it was great to hear and see that most people felt fairly to very safe. And that's exactly what we want to happen. Literally, we want students to be safe, but we also want them to have the feeling of being safe. You can see in grades 6 through 8, there's a little bit more of a sliver with feeling fairly unsafe. And 9 through 12, that gap widens a little bit more. In looking at the comments, there were people who were talking about how, mask breaks, just making sure students are maintaining 6 feet distancing, and that's a little bit more difficult to do. I know Principal Antonelli has been working very hard to remind students to remain distanced during mask breaks too. But overall, we certainly wanted the blue and the red, and the majority, as you can see, answered that they're feeling safe. So then we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the hybrid model. So I selected 3 questions in regards to the hybrid model, and the 3 here are reflecting the K-2 responses. So, and then we've got this same group of 3 questions for the other 3 grade spans. So the first, how is the in-person schedule going? So that's when students show up to school. It's 50% of their class, and then they leave at the early release day. And as you can see, with the key on the right, the majority feel as though it's going well, and some feeling it's okay, and a few, 4 people in total, feeling as though that part's not going well. So moving on to the next part of this model, the hybrid model, is when students are live remote. So they're on screen with their teacher, just like we are here, but from home, from a distance. And again, the majority is between it's going well and it's just okay, with some, but certainly more than above, feeling like it's not going well. So this 14.6% reflects 48 K-2 families who indicated that it's not going well. And then lastly, how do you feel about the asynchronous work that you're getting, the quality level? And that's when students are at home and not online real time with a teacher, and they have to access their activities independently. So you can see 57% said it's decent quality, 18.3% very high, and then the yellow and the green indicate that less than decent or very low quality. So there's similar trends here in grades 3 through 5, in that, of course, most people prefer and feel as though the in-person is going well. And then that sort of that orange starts to creep in when we're talking about the live remote, and we know that in person is much more effective for the majority of students, and a similar type of pattern for that third question about the quality of asynchronous work. And we also know that particularly for the elementary students, the work, it's difficult for teachers to put work out to students that they have to be able to access it, and in terms of finding it in Google Classroom, which that's improving quite a bit now that we're a couple of months into this, and also keep them engaged, because at the younger levels, it's much more difficult to provide activities that keep them fully engaged and wanting to continue to do the work versus sort of drifting off and maybe scooting over to either watch TV or listen to their siblings who are chatting. It's just harder to stay on task at home during those asynchronous times. Then we have 6 through 8. And you can see there's that similar trend. And then you have 9 through 12. So again, the patterns tend to be the same over the course of these 3. We know that in many cases, the asynchronous work is the least preferred, and the in-person connecting with teachers and with peers is most preferred. So those same questions, shifting into the remote learning academy. So these are students who do not come to school for the hybrid model, and their entire school experience is remote. So asking the same question, overall, how is your experience with the RLA, the Remote Learning Academy? And you can see here also the positivity rate is much higher than those who feel as though it has a negative experience, or they're having a negative experience. And the spread is even larger. So as you remember from the hybrid model, it was just over 50% for most of the grade spans that had positive experiences, whereas this ranges from 65 to 81% are feeling as though they are having a positive experience. And if you jump down to the negative answers, it is as low as 2.6 and as high as only 3.8. So it seems that the RLA students and the selection that the family chose seems to be overall a decent fit for them. Moving on to those questions, you see that there's 2 here instead of 3, and the one that's removed is how is the in-class experience going, because the RLA students are not participating in class. And from the packet or the copy I gave you earlier, there were 2 of these charts that I had to adjust. So these might not be exact from what you had earlier, but these are accurate. So here, how is the live portion going? And that's when, again, the students are online live with the teacher, and the majority here are saying it's going well, with some feeling like it's going okay. And then 4 people had indicated that it's not going well. And you've got to remember the percentages. You can't compare these percentages exactly to the other, the percentage-wise, proportionally, it's similar, but the numbers here in the RLA are so much lower in terms of number of students. So that orange is wider than it would have been with the hybrid pie, because there are only 4 people here who indicated it's not going well. So moving on to the second question, how do you feel about the asynchronous work? And most are feeling like it's decent to high quality. With a few, there were 9 people here saying less than decent, and 1 person feels as though at K-2 RLA, it's very low quality. 3 through 5, a very similar type of pattern there. 6 through 8 also. So we're happy to see that in 6 through 8 and the others, that the live in person seems to be effective for the majority of people, that they feel as though it's going well. We were concerned about the amount of time that students are interacting live with teachers. If it's through a computer, is it going to feel effective? And so I think that these numbers are reassuring. And then the same thing here with 9 through 12. You can see up here, there's 7.2% who feel as though it's not going well. That is 6 individuals, whereas 65.1 feel as though it is going well. A lot of these responses in 9 through 12 who answered that things are not going well with RLA was that the students feel a bit isolated from their peers. And as you can imagine, people had predicted that, and even families when they were debating on what type of model they should select. I know that the social aspect of things was one of the pieces that they wanted to weigh out heavily, because students at these ages need to connect, and we know whether it be hybrid or RLA, we have limited time and opportunities for students to do that. So then we wanted to get an understanding, and this is no commitment at all, of how many people are considering switching from one model to the other. So this table here reflects both models, and it's broken down, as you can see on the left, by grade span. And this is important information because our models were built on the numbers that we had in the fall. And even a couple of changes could drastically change some students' experiences. So we are certainly allowing people to switch when and if they reach out and contact their building principal. It may take several weeks before we're able to do that, because there's some prep time on our part that we have to do in order to make that adjustment. But at the K-2 level, and I shifted from percentages just to number of students, because ultimately that's what we'll need to know, is how many students is it. So going from hybrid to RLA, we have about 7 students who are considering making that shift. Whereas on the flip side, we have 27 K-2 students who are currently in RLA that are looking to move to hybrid. In 3 to 5, we've got 13 students who are looking to potentially come out of the school, the in-school model, and shift to RLA, whereas we've got 19 who are thinking about going to hybrid from RLA. And then at the middle school and at the high school level, we have 20 students and 31 students respectively looking to shift to RLA, and then 18 and 15 students that will be potentially shifting from RLA to hybrid. So that's just, until we know who those students are, if this even happens, and what model they're using, what courses they're in at WA, for example, we aren't able to act on any of this data, but it's great for us to know. And we are pleased that it doesn't seem like there's going to be a massive wave of shifting, because that would be really hard to accommodate. So these numbers, I think, are certainly manageable. So in these surveys, we had a lot of feedback. There were several different areas where parents could type in responses. And I was originally going to break out the responses by grade span as well, and I didn't have to. I certainly don't mean to oversimplify the many responses we received and the thoughtful input that parents provided us, but there were definitely some common themes, and the themes at K-2 very much carried forward at the 9 through 12 level. So I just broke them up into 2 parts, and I want to share first some of the commendations, and there were so many. It was really great to read through all of the comments. And first and foremost, the bold statements are those that were just so incredibly reoccurring that I didn't want to just have it there once. I really wanted it to pop out. So many people are just understand what teachers are going through and appreciating the hard work of teachers and staff. I've got just a couple of quotes, a few quotes that I had pulled. My child's teacher is amazing and is knocking it out of the park. Another one, can I start by saying my child's teacher is a goddess and an amazing teacher. My child loves going to RLA class and learning from her. Another one says, I'm grateful to the teaching staff for offering such a comprehensive, high quality learning experience. And the last one I want to share, in my mind, middle school teachers were superheroes before COVID. Now they are so much more than simple superheroes. So as Bill mentioned earlier, these types of comments are just really appreciated. I know the staff is working incredibly hard. We've mentioned that time and time again to all of you, and I know you know that, but everybody is tender on the inside. So it's wonderful to hear and see the feedback that they're receiving and the recognition as well. And then the other commendation was that for the hybrid model, students were coming in. And, you know, that's a positive to our model, but it also shows that people really value that in-person time. And you'll see on the other side that they want more of it, or many do. So then moving on to number 3 under commendations, staying connected without exposure. There were a lot of people who were appreciative of the Remote Learning Academy model, saying that they don't have to risk the health concerns that they have, but they're able to continue with the academic experience. Enhancing student independence. Many said that their students are now much more independent with logging on, doing homework, time management, because they don't have the teacher over them full-time organizing it for and with them. Others had recognized that students and teachers, but in this case, the intention was that several parents were saying how much their children improved their level of savviness with technology. And lastly, one of the very common comments were that there's extra time in the morning for students to sleep, whether it be their asynchronous at-home days or those who are in the RLA. There are times where they can just wake up at what feels like a more normal hour. And then there are concerns. So shifting over to the right-hand side, people want more in-person time. And of course, this primarily came from those in the hybrid model. They are pushing for a full return, as Bill had mentioned earlier. We're getting a lot of those emails, and this was another way for parents to express that wish. And then others also mentioned moving from the kind of early release day model to a full day model, keeping the hybrid. So several suggestions there for that too. The RLA teachers were, RLA families were asking for more live time. So whether it's through the lens of RLA or through those hybrid students, people want more face time with teachers. And that was the biggest piece that we were concerned about, is that any hybrid model does compromise that. So people are certainly missing the amount of in-person interaction between students and teachers. Then we've got inconsistency with posting of schoolwork. A lot of that came from the high school level, because from one teacher to the next, of course, there's different styles. So when you're juggling work from multiple teachers, there might be different ways to access schoolwork. So that was something that was mentioned. And then for the younger students, the amount of at-home adult support that's needed is obviously a big responsibilities for the families. So not only is childcare an issue, but then even it's not just supervision, it's also help and support to get students. I mean, we've got kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and some of them are very early readers or non-readers, and it's difficult to access anything when you're not quite yet a reader. So these were very interesting to read through. I'm not sure that there were any shocking surprises, but it is nice to have it all in one place, to have it quantified, and then for the open responses, have it qualified, how families are feeling. And as we mentioned earlier, a next step would be to have staff be surveyed and even students, so that we can kind of put all of those data points together to determine whether or not we stay the course or look to make a shift. I do just want to mention too, the more in-person time, while many want to go back fully back to school like previous years, and I mentioned others feel as though shifting to a full day would be great. There were some people who had mentioned that they really appreciate the FaceTime during the at-home days for students, the afternoon log-ons. And that's one of the things, even more than not being able to do lunch, that's one of the things that we found to be so valuable in planning this. And we just really felt it was important to have students connect with teachers every day, certainly when they're home. And if we went full day, that would be one of the things that we would have to sacrifice, is that the students at home would not have FaceTime with teachers. So that's one of the big pieces. We talked a little bit earlier, and Jen, when you had brought up your comment, and that sentiment was threaded throughout some of these comments as well. But I don't want to lose sight of that either. So we do look forward to taking this information along with the other input from other stakeholders, and then coming back to you with some suggestions or thoughts or just reflections in general.
Thank you for all of that detailed information, Carrie. And I'm sure the committee has questions. I think I saw a hand, Valerie.
I already emailed this to you, but I really appreciated the quick turnaround. I'm sure something else slipped to make this ready for tonight, so I really appreciated that. One thing I just wanted to call out, and I think you can see it in the participation percentages, was that I saw on social media a lot of confusion about the title of the survey. People thought that it was for the hybrid students and hybrid families versus the hybrid, learning model. So I wonder if that played out in the low percentage of RLA responses. And I had actually heard from a handful of families that they hadn't gotten the Blackboard email push. So any other surveys that we might consider in the future, I think, could go out a variety of ways, directly through principals maybe as well. And just kind of even a reminder, like last Wednesday or Thursday, I think would have helped drive up a little bit more participation.
Thank you.
I had one more thought on the content of the survey. And I don't really know what my fix would be. But I guess I just was wanting more, more of the numbers behind some of the comments, like how to word some questions to get data on the themes that we're seeing in the comments. Does that make sense? Not because as a second grade parent filling that out, I could tell that the questions are about like the quality of the asynchronous work. I think is great, but like you mentioned about the student's experience, right? Like, are they engaged? Can they access it independently? So it doesn't really get to the family's experience of it. The quality of the work from the teachers is phenomenal. But I guess I would love to see some way to quantify, how this is working in homes. And while that seems to come out a lot in the comments, I don't know how to word a question that kind of gets it into a pie chart form to really say like, you know, how is this working kind of overall, and what kind of changes would you make? Like those are the questions I guess I would love to see if we're ever talking about another survey or something. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Valerie, so I just want to, because there will be other surveys, probably plenty more. So the question around, generally speaking, how has the hybrid, I paraphrased, experience been, or the RLA experience been? And I had listed them by percentages. There are certainly charts for that as well. So can you just clarify, and then of course comments were very insightful, but what part would be missing from there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I like I said, I don't know what the ideal wording would be. It's just, it doesn't feel like for my kid, it's generally positive, but would I don't know, I guess maybe it would be like more like, would I have chosen something else? Or, you know, something that kind of pokes at like how many parents are, you know, unhappy with it. Not in the fact that like, this is what we have and it's working generally positively, but, you know, it circles back to the discussions we've been having all night, right? About families.
Chris.
Thanks again to Carrie for the data and for the survey. I think it is, you know, it does help us get to some of what's going on. The one question I have is, we have at WA a slightly different model where we have teachers teaching to in-class students and at-home students at the same time, which essentially doubles the possibilities for face-to-face interaction and increases their flexibility on how they teach, and they can choose. And I've noticed from teacher to teacher and week to week with my kids, you know, there's a variety of how they use that time and use that technology, and it's not always, you know, the same every day. You know, one day we may be live both morning and afternoon. Next week we may not be, but which I think they do what works for them. Can you talk to me how that might or might not work at lower levels to increase face time?
Well, at WA, the RLA model was live streaming. And that's because we couldn't cohort students because every child had an individual personalized schedule. Because at the other levels, we could cohort students and then the teacher would just be planning for her or his RLA cohort, it's basically the hybrid model, but instead of in person, they're just logging on with their students. So there really isn't much opportunity for the at-home students to log in live with the teachers because they don't have live streaming. So if I have a teacher teaching Pod A and Pod B hybrid, when Pod A is in, Pod B is at home, and there's nothing that I'm showing or doing to be able to bring them in virtually because I'm not live streaming into my classroom. And that was something that was deliberate because we wanted for the RLA students where we could, for those lessons and those plans and those activities to be tailored specifically to that group of online students. So our where we could cohort them and have specific classes for RLA students, all RLA students, that was how we prioritized that.
So, yeah, so I guess the crux of my question is, as you said, that we don't have them streaming. If we did, would there be a benefit? And would there be a cost? And I'm just throwing it out there as, you know, sort of the next, you know, thinking about next steps. And because I know, because we saw one of the major concerns is the amount of live instruction. I know it's a different ball of wax. I know teaching first graders in a classroom while also teaching first graders at home may not work, but I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on how it might or might not work if we did a model like that.
Right. Well, at the elementary levels, we agreed that we didn't feel as though live streaming would be the best model for them, or even a decent model, because I think it would be too hard to keep them engaged. We certainly have other districts who are nearby who are doing that, and jury is out in terms of whether or not their teachers feel as though it's effective. One of them actually called us to ask what we're doing, because those teachers are saying, but Westford doesn't have to live stream their elementary kids. They can just teach to the people who are in front of them. And then the students who are live streaming for RLA get their own teacher who's doing just RLA. So it's definitely not off the table. I don't think anything is. As this evolves, we can evaluate what makes the most sense. So I think from an elementary point of view, we would just want to do our due diligence to make sure that something like that would make sense. And again, we want the teachers to be able to optimize the use of the time with the in-person kids who are in front of them. So we'd have to just weigh that piece out. And at the middle school level, even at the high school level, so the RLA students do live stream in, but they still technically have off weeks too. I think what you're referring to is the select group of teachers who decided to, they had the freedom to do so, but it wasn't the core model. Instead of planning asynchronous work for their at-home hybrid kids, they were streaming those students in. So that was kind of like a test drive in some ways, that teachers were more than willing and wanting to do that. They actually brought that to us and we said, sure. But it's not anything that we are able to mandate or would want to yet. However, we can certainly revisit that as we continue to look ahead at what makes the most sense.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the committee? I know this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and I very much appreciate the check-in with parents to see how things are going. I think hearing the perspective from the staff is going to be also a really important component as we kind of further reflect on how things are going, and what, if any, adjustments or tweaks could be made or should be made, or whether we're really in the best vein and we need to just continue refining the approach that we have. But I'm glad we're having this conversation. Anything else before we move on? Okay.
May I just say something for a minute, Gloria?
Yes,
I just
please.
wanted to thank, I was talking with Carrie today, and I'll tell you, between putting the survey together, receiving the results, aggregating all the information, and doing a terrific report, top notch. Can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
And speedily done as well. So
Yes.
thank you very much. Appreciate that. What is next on our list? I've lost track. Student activity accounts.
This will be very fast. So annually, it's best practice for the school committee to approve the maximum balances in the checking accounts for the student activity funds. Just as a quick overview and reminder, every school has, and with the principal being in charge of the accounts, have really two bank accounts, a savings and a checking account for their student activities. These are monies that are totally separate from the general fund and taxpayer money. These are the students' monies that are used for everything from field trips to the various clubs and student activities that our students participate in. You know, when some of our sports teams fundraise for special jackets and sweatshirts. So these accounts really function generally as kind of in and out accounts. Students put money in, and then as they are older to have more and more control of how those funds are spent. So something that's a little different than our own banking accounts is that all the deposits go into the savings account, and then all expenses, all the checks are written out of the checking account, and then we, through the town treasurer, do a transfer from the savings account to the checking account to keep the balances sufficient for the checks that are written. And so what I'm asking tonight is that these are my recommended, they're the same as last year's maximum balances for the checking accounts. So if they're generally, I do an analysis of how many checks are written per year at what amounts at certain times of the year. Particularly at the high school, it'll be higher, mainly because of the Disney trip. In April, we generally have to very, very quickly write over $300,000 worth of checks to cover the airfare and then the park and all the expenses with that trip. So it's kind of this short period. There's a lot of money in the account, and then it goes right out. So, but generally, these are good balances for allowing our students to participate in their activities.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Valerie?
Hi, sorry, just as a total newbie, I pulled up the policy to try and get some context on this. Is this our annual review where we look at the balances too, or does that happen at a different time of year?
So because of COVID, that normally should have happened by now. And we've been just really getting it all together.
Oh, sure. Yep.
So I have everyone done except the high school, in the sense that I reviewed. The high school is much more complex. Obviously, there's a lot more, but it's referenced in the policy as well. Those are the student money. So not only does the school, the financial secretary help it, kind of, she tracks all the money in Quicken and balances the bank accounts, but the students also have a part in keeping track of the funds. So we like every year for the clubs to sign off as well on the balances to make sure everyone agrees. And so that's just a piece, and this year it's a little more challenging to get everyone kind of signed on. So yeah. And then there are some inactive clubs also at the high school that we're just trying to, Betsy Murphy's working on that to identify, and we'll bring those to you to officially talk about closing down.
Thanks. It's hard to have nothing to compare it to, right. And to have the first of everything be in an unprecedented COVID right. Unusual year. So I'm trying to figure out what's normal and what's not.
And so it's a new policy, as Alicia and Gloria and Megan were part of the policy subcommittee for a couple of years, and that policy was completely rewritten and expanded and really modeled to be in line with the DESE guidelines. So there are lots of new pieces, so you won't actually be the total newbie, because there'll be pieces that we'll be bringing that kind of are now in line with the new policy.
It has taken a lot of work, and Ingrid, thank you so much, because we know it has been such a project to kind of mold those new processes and to put those into place. So so for this evening, do you want us to take a vote on that maximum balances, and then at a later meeting we'll review the ongoing? Yes. Yep. Okay. Any other questions before we entertain that motion?
All right, just to triple clarify, so does the maximum balance have, like, is there anything like, are there actual activities that we are sanctioning by having maximum balances? Is that a different conversation about
No.
trips and stuff like that?
No, it's just really pretty much it's a safety net a little bit, that you wouldn't have all your money in the checking account, which would, I mean, our schools are great. The checkbooks are in the safe. It's not like the checks are lying around, but it's another just a safeguard that not all the money in the full 2 accounts are in one more accessible account.
Great, thank you for helping a newbie.
Oh,
yes, sure. And I think those safeguards are important, as Ingrid's referenced, as we are custodians in a sense for these funds on behalf of students, because student activity funds do belong to students and are to be used on their behalf and not for anything else. So these extra safeguards make sense. So I will make a motion to set the maximum account balances as indicated in the memo in our packet. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor, Avery?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
And I would be aye, so that would be unanimous. Thank you, Ingrid. Appreciate you keeping all of this on track.
Oh, thank you.
I know it's a lot of moving pieces. Next up, we have another memorandum of agreement with the WEA. Bill, I know this touches on COVID notifications and snow days, which have both had questions from parents. So do you want to speak to this one?
Sure, thank you. We wanted to really kind of codify what's going to happen in terms of COVID notification, not only of parents, but the staff, because the staff are extraordinarily concerned about being notified. So we have basically indicated that it will be the responsibility of the administrator, the principal in the building, to notify the staff of a positive case. It will not be disclosed, the child's name and etc. Just the notification of the staff. And so that's basically what we're able to negotiate with the WEA. I want to thank the WEA for working with us on this particular MOA. So this is basically putting into text what we have intended to do all along and are doing. So there was a little bit of a delay in one notification about 3 or 4 weeks ago, but the notifications by the principal in combination with the school nurse have been quite timely and very helpful to the staff and to the parents. So that's basically standard practice that we will be undertaking. We have a standard message that goes home to parents and goes out to the staff that does not disclose any confidential information. I'll just quickly go through the snow days. The snow days, we wanted to really let the staff and the parents know what will be happening this year with days that ordinarily would have been considered a 1 or 2 hour delay. Those are no longer in existence as long as we have the half-day hybrid model, because they eat too much into the actual instructional day, which is shorter than the full day, obviously. And then what will happen during a more significant snowfall that in some cases might not result in a power outage, either locally or regionally, but also one that might result in a power outage, which we have to be very cognizant of, because that therefore interrupts instruction and equity to a number of students. So, snow days are always intriguing in nature. Now they become a little bit more so. And so we'll just, I'll talk it over with Kerry, talk it over with some other people in the school system before final call. What I will do this year is, as in the past, I will let our staff know around 5 o'clock in the morning of any weather event, and we'll let the parents know by 6 o'clock in the morning. The only reason for that differential is because from experience, the parents do not want to be called at 5 o'clock in the morning, because oftentimes, very seriously, they think it might be a family emergency, and that's what I've heard in the past. So I want to be cognizant and respectful of family needs. So this will be our protocol going forward. If you approve it tonight, which I'm hoping you will, then we will immediately send this out to the staff and to the parents tomorrow to let them know. And I know it's like springtime right now, but within the next few days, who knows, it could be 30 and snow. So it's that time of year.
Any questions before we call for a vote? Alicia?
Just a quick comment as someone who lives in the tree streets, I appreciate the attention paid to whether or not we may or may not have power, because everyone in the tree streets can tell you half town could have power, the rest of town could have power, and the tree streets could have nothing. So I very much appreciate that. And that, we're still maintaining the idea of a snow day for our kids. With everything else that's going on this year and with all the other considerations, it's nice to know that, there could still be a snow day, fingers crossed. So
please know that I am keeping that in mind. Okay. Because it does, you have an advocate with you, Alicia, and that's Kerry. And Kerry came into my office a couple of weeks ago when I was drafting. He said, "Can't you just let them enjoy the snow day?" So I'm sure she'll lobby heavily at 4:30 in the morning.
I'm sure the senior class feels strongly about that,
Oh,
Bill.
definitely.
They always do. Seniors take their snow days very seriously.
Yes,
Glad
they
to know
do.
it's still possible. Motion to authorize me to sign the memorandum of agreement between the school committee and the WEA regarding staff COVID notifications and snow days.
Second.
All in favor, Avery?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
And I. So that would be unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll get that signed and forwarded to the WEA. And then I believe we are on to warrants. Alicia, you're up.
Okay, motion to approve payroll warrant 2120 SP dated November 12th, 2020 in the amount of $2,112,897.21.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor, Avery?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
And I would be unanimous.
Okay, motion to approve expense warrant 2120 SE dated November 12th, 2020 in the amount of $885,637.72.
Second.
And all in favor, Avery?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
And I would be unanimous. Minutes.
Okay, motion to approve school committee meeting minutes regular session dated October 26th, 2020.
Any comments,
Second.
questions, amendments? Nope. Okay. Approval. Avery?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
And I would be unanimous. And last one.
Motion to approve school committee executive session minutes not for public release dated October 5th, 2020, number 1, October 5th, 2020, number 2, and October 14th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor? Avery,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
and I would be unanimous. And we're on to personnel update.
Nothing remarkable. It's a much shorter one because it is a more constrained time period. Most of the positions, as you see, are support positions in nature. Those are some of the ones that we've had more difficulty hiring. And some of them are replacements. A lot of them are replacements of staff because of staff turnover.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, then we're back to Alicia for our final motion.
Okay, motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to Unit A collective bargaining, and an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position. The committee will not return to public session.
Second.
And all in favor, roll call. Avery. Chris.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Ming Chen.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
And I would be unanimous. And as Alicia indicated, we will not be returning to public session. Thank you for everyone who stayed to the end, and have a good evening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good night.